Hello, this is Dr. Harden. Wanted to shoot a brief video to encourage you, especially if you're a first class online graduate student. It can be quite overwhelming, and I wanted to just give you some things to think about or a way to approach things that might help you weather this storm of what feels like, I'm sure, to many of you, drinking through a fire hose. Let me start by saying that there's a difference between graduate level. No, let me start before that. There's a difference between online learning and traditional learning. In a traditional learning environment, you sit in a class, a professor will go over lecture notes or whatever. There'll be some group discussion, but you can sit there and hide in the back and not really do anything, and then just get tested on it and move on. In the online environment, though, there's really no hiding. Everybody has to participate in discussions, for instance. It's also a little bit different, whereas the majority of delivery of the material in traditional classrooms is through the professor. In an online environment, the majority of the delivery of the material comes from the course itself, the course management system, which means there's a lot of writing, articles, book chapters, videos and things like that, but it's not your typical traditional, let me stand up and lecture you for 50 minutes kind of setup. My job as an online professor is I can do some of those things, but mainly is to make sure you have the resources you need, answer questions you have, facilitate discussion, and also just help you see things from a certain angle, let's say, as the discussion leads. So I'm not quite as domineering in an online role as it would be necessary for me to be in a traditional classroom. I mean, that doesn't mean I'm not in control of the classroom or anything like that, but it just means that the delivery method, the means through which is basically the written word and discussions, those kind of things that are codified in the course management system. So that's the first thing. Second thing, let's talk a little bit about the difference in graduate level learning versus undergraduate level learning. In the undergraduate programs, what typically happens is you're learning material, you're learning facts, you're learning things that you can spit back out on an exam or a test so that you can show your professor you're aware of the material. That's undergraduate learning for the most part. You're also acquiring skills like on how to write a paper as far as Turabian or APA or whatever, as far as formatting and those kind of things. When you go to the graduate level, it's a different ballgame. It's expected that you understand a lot of the facts, or you can accumulate those facts fairly quickly through reading and taking notes and those kind of things. But the most important thing for the graduate level is that instead of just memorizing lists of things, you're actually finding connections between different pieces of information. And so you're taking, let's say if you have 3 textbooks and 2 articles, that's 5 sources. In a graduate level program, what they're really wanting you to do is be able to take and find the common theme, let's say, that ties those 5 sources together and be able to articulate that in a coherent fashion in written form, for instance, or on a presentation. So it's much more about developing a web. Our undergraduate is about understanding ideas, the existence of ideas. Master's level education is about creating a connected web of those ideas that can be applied to real life situations. So it's much more than just memorizing stuff. So if you're stuck at not reading the material or whatever, you haven't got to first base yet. On a graduate program, it's expected you know how to read the material and take notes on it, but you're also encouraged then or challenged to put those things together via a web of interconnected ideas so that you can see the themes that surface and you can do something with those ideas. So that's what that's about. The third thing is especially depending on where you're teaching or where you're learning from, it's important to very carefully, because most of the information is delivered to you through a course management system, which means a lot of written instructions and those kind of things. It's really important to follow the instructions carefully. It is to also understand the grading rubrics and really follow closely any examples that are given. If you're given an example paper, for instance, you need to make that paper your paper look like that paper. The other thing is you need to slowly and carefully read the instructions and take notes on those instructions if possible to make sure that you don't omit anything. One of the greatest things I'm discovering in the 21st century is that because we're in this information overload age, what happens is students don't do as well because they have not trained themselves to make sure they aren't careless and they overlook things. If there's 5 questions that need to be answered, you need to answer those 5 questions, and you need to really get to the spirit of what the question's asking. And so if you just glance over it or don't pay attention to it, it's not your professor's fault. It's yours for not taking the time to understand it. See, that's the difference. If I'm in a classroom and you raise your hand and ask me, I can tell you right away within about 2 minutes, oh yeah, do this or do that. That's not how graduate level online education works. I mean, I can if you ask a question, but what I'm finding is often the question gets asked after they get grading feedback. So learn up front by following those instructions very, very well. The next thing would be, let me see here. I've got some notes here. Let me check real quick. Okay. Once again, I mentioned this before. Study in a graduate way. And what that means is you're not just looking for facts, but you're looking to connect facts with other facts from other resources. So if you're given a thing to reflect on and it says, do these things, then you need to be able to do those things. You need to be able to show that this book and this book and this article has this theme that we know if we do these 3 things, this will be the result. You need to be able to articulate that and show how that answers the question. Okay, so that's sort of important. When you look, the other thing, the last thing I'll say, and then I might give you a little bit of an example here, is that you need to write to the rubric. Understand if your professor provides you with a rubric, you need to write to the rubric. In other words, if there's that column on the left side there that says basically this is outstanding, this is average in the middle, and this is poor on the right side, let's say, you look at that excellent article and you make sure when you're cultivating that assignment, when you're creating it, when you're putting it together, that you're answering everything that rubric is looking for, because that rubric is how your professor is going to be grading that paper. You've been given, this is what I'm looking for, right there. Now, of course, if you have any questions, ask those before the assignment's due. Don't wait to the last second either. An emergency of lack of planning on your part is not an urgent thing on your professor's part. You have access to the course as we get started, so make sure that you follow through with that. So, the important thing I want to talk about is now a practical strategy. I'm going to call this, you need to really focus or capitalize on what I'm going to call the weekly review if you're an online student. And so let's say that if your week starts on Monday, sometime on Sunday, you sit down and you open your course management system. Let's look at, let me see here, let me pull one up for us while we're talking. That might be a helpful example. Let me see if I've got one here that I can reach out and get for some reason. Okay, hang on a minute here. It's not working well. Give me just a second here. So we look in Module 3 here of this one course that I'm teaching. Now right here are some instructions. You'll see this. You need to read these instructions, and you need to understand here, it even says upon successful completion, right there, you're going to know these things. You're going to be able to do these things that are right here. So you need to think that through, okay? Be sure to complete all the introductions. So you need to go down through the list that are in the course management system and how that looks. And then let's go to the next screen. It'll tell you in this case that you're supposed to read a book. You're supposed to read another book. It's pretty straightforward there. And then you can download this. There's a reason there's a problem that says the service is currently unavailable. But you can download this handout, which is very important, but you go straight through everything. This really didn't work. Apparently the system's gone down. That's wonderful, isn't it? That's something else you have to deal with when you're dealing with with these kind of things. But the idea is go through every bit, every step, all the way around, print out things if you need to, or look at them online, and you need to make sure you understand the material, because that's the material from which you're going to apply things. So that being the case, just make sure that that's what you're doing. Well, I hope this has been helpful. Maybe in a future video I'll be able to walk you through an actual example where the system isn't down, but this should get you started. So the idea is start with a weekly review where you look at what all your deliverables are that week. Make sure that you've got all your material that you need, and then read through very carefully the instructions, the rubrics, any examples, because that's what the deliverable is going to be. And then work your way, then start with all the reading materials. Take careful notes to make linking connections or a web of information that would think toward the rubric, think toward what you're being tested on and how the information you're learning applies to that. And take notes of that. And then by the time it's time to do your assignment, you've got everything pretty much together. This is more, you don't get any smarter as a master's program student. A grad student's no smarter. A grad student knows how to take the facts that you learned how to pull together in an undergraduate program and put them together and make them sing. It's almost like if you were learning to play the guitar. In the undergrad, you learn chords G, C, and D on the guitar. In the grad program, you learn how to put G, C, and D together to make a song. So I hope that this has been helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know. God bless, and I look forward to seeing how you do over the course of this term.